In the realm of anime, there's a bunch of shows that often get left behind or forgotten. Buried under the fact the medium has such a large selection of series coming out each season, some remain unearthed in an aura of nostalgia, oftentimes leading to a ton of hidden gems. Now, it also depends on how big the following of the manga or anime was in the first place. Whether it's an adaptation or not, if it tries to be revolutionary, outright to change or modify the current status quo or not. During the late 90s, early 2000s, a bunch of such shows happened to just kind of fall through the cracks and are barely talked about even nowadays. I tend to have certain tastes which don't really allow me to lock myself in the confines of just watching what's new and popular. So I occasionally either explore these sort of periods in time. I find anime from all periods to hold certain meanings and have its own gems. So I oftentimes find myself not exploring the early to late 80s or early 90s, but anime from most decades if I can. There's a kind of quiet richness to experiencing something which feels only more profound than the average show, either by theming or a variety of factors. So when I do find good candidates, I try to write down my thoughts. In my most recent exploration, I happened to stumble across an utmost interesting show. So begins the tale of a quiet story born from the mind of Yoshitoshi Abe, who you might know from his extremely influential work on another small anime which almost suffered the same fate as many late 90s ones, Serial Experiments Lane. Though Lane would later become a cornerstone of internet-era anime culture and would receive a massive cult following, its initial reception in the early 2000s was muted. Like many experimental shows of the late 90s, it almost disappeared into obscurity, only to be resurrected later by online forums, AMVs, and word of mouth. Abe's work on Lane was mainly as a character designer on it, creating most of the appearances and visual sensibilities of its world. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Abe confessed to have never read manga as a child, as it was off limits in his household. So a lot of what influenced him in designing Lane's characters were, in his own words, nature and everything around him. The colors of leaves, the posture of a tree, the stillness of an empty road. That organic observational quality would go on to inform much of his later work, and especially that of the next work he had his sights on. After the release of Lane, Abe would soon after decide he wished to have more creative control over his next project. Rather than just lending his eye to someone else's script, he decided to begin writing and sketching a story of his own. He began by outlining a base for a manga about aliens coming to Earth and integrating themselves into a small Japanese town. The story eventually took the shape of what would become NieA Under 7. The manga follows Mayuko, a recent high school graduate attending cram school, in preparation for college. With no place of her own, she ends up living in a dilapidated countryside bathhouse that barely stays afloat. Things are made more complicated when she has to share her room with NieA, an alien girl who lacks an antenna and is considered an under 7, a class despised by other aliens due to being the lowest of their kind. Midway through the manga's run, NieA Under 7 caught the attention of Triangle staff, who picked it up for an anime adaptation. Abe pretty much entrusted them with doing a good job since he had worked in the past extensively with Triangle, especially on the aforementioned Serial Experiments Lane. Much of the anime staff also worked on Serial Experiments Lane, so as a result, producer Yasuyuki Ueda suggested the team work on a lighter anime as a relief from the dark, heavily psychological themes present in Lane. While the end result ended up straying quite a few ways more than one away from the manga, some of Lane's theming and the studio's notoriety added some interesting themes to the whole thing. While it undoubtedly kept its lighter tone, a lot of it is underlined by an interesting melancholy and quite bizarrely framed social commentary that we'll discuss more about as we go on. I think the first thing of note that I can say about NieA is that you can't really spoil it. It is as slice of life as a show could get, although it has a few exceptions. Most of the characters, apart from a few, suffer from sitcom syndrome, where they don't develop much throughout the series. The story never reaches a certain, climax, because that's besides a lot of the point the story is trying to convey. Instead, it has a tendency to bathe in its self-reflection and relaxed manner to a degree that actually makes it feel fluid to a certain extent. The story feels at times very floaty between episodes. It fluctuates between different atmospheres and goes so much that at times it's as if the plot doesn't seem to envelop the same narrative thread any longer. It starts off as a light-hearted comedy with inklings of something deeper being at the seed of the story. However, as it progresses, its identity sort of crumbles in an extremely interesting manner. Sometimes it's seinen, sometimes sci-fi, at other times it's end of Eva for a brief period of time. While many would attribute these ideas to a single lack of cohesion on Abe's part, or the writing staff of the anime, I feel like this is a very deliberate choice in the context of this story. I'll tackle this as I go more in depth with the tale. The main narrative vision mainly follows things from Mayuko's perspective, the student who in preparation for college has to balance out her job as a food delivery girl, making ends meet to have enough food for both her and the homeless alien girl now living in her closet, and being up to date with the material presented at her cram school. The action mostly centers around NieA's tendencies to get in trouble and how that negatively affects Mayu's life usually. For example, during the first episode of the show, Mayuko meets up with a girl named Chiaki, who is the equivalent of the average user of the X paranormal board. More in that sense that she's consumed by sightings, theories and imagined conspiracies, extremely obsessed with UFOs and their sightings to a degree that borders on pathological. What makes her obsession particularly tragicomic is that she lives in a world where aliens actually do exist openly, casually and unceremoniously. The presence of aliens like NieA, treated as little more than a socio-economic underclass, does not satisfy Chiaki's desire for otherworldly meaning. Instead, it seems to deepen her obsession, because the UFOs are no longer transcendent or mysterious, because they are part of the mundane fabric of her world. Chiaki's fixation becomes even more irrational. She clings to conspiracy theories and grand cosmic narratives as a way of escaping a reality where the existence of aliens has failed to change anything meaningful. Rather than demystifying the unknown, the casual presence of UFOs in NieA Under 7 intensifies the need to mythologize them. Especially for those like Chiaki who seek something beyond the drudgery of ordinary life. Even she says it in the cafe, Tokyo hasn't changed much. Despite their intrusion and how comical her obsession and probably others' obsessions are, nothing of significance has changed. She's mostly interested in the big ship that carried the aliens to Earth long ago. The mothership, a vessel which coincidentally enough can be seen from right outside Mayuko's window in her room at the bathhouse. So Mayuko decides to let Chiaki come visit her place. During this episode, Chiaki wishes very hard to ride on a UFO, so NieA manages to build one inside Mayuko's room and blows a hole so big in her roof that for the rest of the show they don't manage to fix it properly due to the high costs. This is but one example of the sort of many unfortunate things which end up happening to Mayuko. It's all treated in a light-hearted way, however, to such an extent that we as the audience feel a diminished dissatisfaction from the fact fate treats Mayu this way. I think the show sort of shines in its ability to keep characters still, but Mayuko by far is a very realistically written young woman. She's very responsible with her money but stingy when it comes to NieA due to her being a freeloader. She's empathetic and very hardworking, so when she does sleep up due to stress or a variety of other factors, we as the audience don't necessarily feel the need to be angry at her, because her condition is very relatable. In many ways, it's the way this is balanced that would make it perfect for a dual identity story to be told. Think of the way a Spider-Man story usually works. In those types of stories, the main character of Peter Parker has to balance his lower income life with that of the superhero Spider-Man. So when one eventually slips up, we can't always feel mad at the character because we know what kind of pressure he's under. Mayu in that sense fills up a lot of the classic archetypal spots of the underdog. In many ways you can't help but feel bad for her. While as I said this is all played in a light-hearted tone, her struggles sort of echo throughout the entire show, especially to those who have at least once in their life struggled financially. I think the show's focus is then on a lot of the aspects of class disparity, and it tackles certain themes of racism and discrimination as well as the life lower classes end up living in society. But what I like about it is that underneath it all there seems to be an allure of mystery. As I said, there's no mystery at the epicenter of the work, but it's built almost like there is one. A question that lingers and is hidden within the show's more contemplative moments. These few fragments are by far some of my favorite happenings of the show. In the very first episode, as Mayuko begins to drift off to sleep, she wonders aloud why NieA is still living with her. She also reflects on how strange it once felt to see so many aliens scattered across Japan, a phenomenon that has now become so ordinary, so routine, that no one really questions it anymore. Behind the thought of that, an ethereal organ plays out of the white void, orange and green, a moment frozen in time. It's Mayu's youth, her memory of the autumn she was going to start elementary school. Her father is there. Everything seems stuck in time and passing almost through a reticule of tenderness. The simple moment of childhood innocence that I wish to relive. All of those memories when I remember the amber trees of my childhood. The moment Mayu remembered her own, frozen in a single moment, felt like a nostalgic entrapping of time's sick joke, thrown onto a canvas in video form. Her father asks what she'd want for a gift, and a simple glance at the watch he had on his hand tells us she wants it. As the beeping of the alarm goes off, we're hit with a strange reality. The watch is in her possession, but her father is now absent. A rude awakening to the real world. The reality is that Mayu is broke. She barely has enough money to keep herself afloat and feed herself. Not even mentioning the fact NieA is freeloading off her. She's already severely struggling with daily life and balancing work life and school as she tries her best to get into college. Like so many others in her position, she's forced to stretch every coin, which usually results in her sacrificing comfort for survival, eating plain rice or not eating at all some days, just to be able to pay the bills. Her days are filled with part-time jobs, long commutes and exam prep, all while living in a crumbling bathhouse that barely holds together, both physically and economically, as the roof of her room remains collapsed after the first episode. In that way, while the slice of life tone is kept, it's established in a direct way that the character's actions have consequences to the overarching plot and narrative. As I mentioned earlier, some characters do suffer from sitcom syndrome, but they still react appropriately to whatever is happening. Atmospheres do tend to shift from episode to episode as arguments spark between NieA and Mayu, which eventually result in NieA going to reconnect with the mothership, the thing which brought all the aliens to Earth, leaving Mayu alone. Now, I think that an important distinction to be made is the fact that the show is underlined with not necessarily subtle social commentary. It's quite on the face the fact aliens are supposed to represent immigrants of any type. A few of them are quite stereotyped, like the Indian man or the Chinese lady, who both appear to fall right within a stereotype. At the core of it, it's an anime about the struggle of the working class, the struggle with money, integration, and identity. I guess that's why in the context of the story, despite the immigrant aliens being integrated into society and split into classes, nothing changes much in Tokyo. The aliens get some of the lower class jobs like waitresses or cashiers, and they organize meetings to improve their overall image in a certain area. Another thing to note is that the majority of them do not get the luxury to live in the big city. Even close to the Enohana bathhouse, there's a small neighborhood of segregated aliens living in what essentially are slums. This paints a bleak picture of the way immigrants create their own communities whenever they travel due to the amount of discrimination happening. I severely doubt, however, this is just a critique of Japan's immigrant culture, but more like a general, very light jab at it. The show never shoves it down your face, but the moment you stop to think, you start noticing certain disparities, which, as you'll see, not only relate to race and culture, but to more interesting overarching messages paved with a variety of small insights into the aliens' lives. There's a certain mystique around the aliens' arrival to Earth, mainly presented through the mothership. Throughout the entire show, and well, even in the first episode, we get to see it, and it manages to immediately build a sense of mystery. During the episodes in which it appears, it sends sonar-like sounds to NieA, causing her to eventually leave the bathhouse in order to do something we never learn. Although the reason for her departure is primarily due to the mothership, this happens right after an argument with Mayu, which leads Mayu to believe that NieA left because of her behavior towards the freeloader. At first, she's relieved to be left alone, but soon she starts worrying about NieA and asking about yielding close to no results. Most people reassuring her that NieA will eventually come back. Although Mayu is slowly losing hope. Now that she's gone, there's a visible state of distress in her that even the other characters around her notice. Depression, perpetual sadness. Although she complained about NieA, there's a tangible regret now that her friend is gone, foreshadowing the act of saying goodbye to something, The reason NieA left in the first place was because she received a message from the mothership in which the ship was saying goodbye. At this point in the story, we as the audience are unaware of the fact that NieA might return, so we see this as a potential exit. It starts worrying the viewer as well, which is quite literally the intended effect with this sudden tonal shift. During the entirety of the 12th episode, there's a heavy air protruding when taking her usual road up to the bus. The light shafts down through the plants and casts shadows, but something isn't right. The behavior of the dragonflies shows the hot weather is coming to an end. Mayu looks melancholically and says, "So the summer's really over." A song hosting an unbreakable sadness plays, showing us the people at the end of summer. We see Mayu on public transport going somewhere. She ends up visiting an identification booth for missing persons. In order to find NieA, she considers the idea of reporting her absence directly to the state. But once she tries to, she is faced with the cold reality that the state refuses to identify anyone who isn't at least an under 5. As her sullen face becomes lost in the city's glamour, this terrible chill runs down her spine. Real-life footage of the city flashes showing posters of missing cats, development zones, changes in its ever-present existence. They don't keep records for these people and don't even acknowledge them as being people. So the social worker tells Mayu, NieA is someone that never existed. As such, there is no point in looking for someone who never existed in the first place. The socio-economic and racial parallel starts strong as it builds a compelling case for real-life discrimination. Mayu rushes off and the show breaks apart, end of Eva style. Discrimination, reflection of reality, social disparity, contemplation, just for the fall of hope, just for a glimmer of a moment. Why look for someone who never existed in the first place? A heavy, saddened air fills the room as she storms off angrily. But in her mind, she wonders what the under-7s might have done to be discriminated against. The thing is, the reason why NieA has disappeared in the first place is to connect with her legacy, the mothership. Since the aliens are recent in the land of Earth, they refuse to have a legacy and identity apparent to those who do not look past the surface. As such, through her disappearance, parallels are drawn to foreigners again and again, and the issue of those who move to countries which are not their own. Legacy is the thing on which the centermost piece of NieA's story sits. As you very well remember, the beginning of the story focuses on the legacy of Mayu's watch, her inability to remember what happened, and the bathhouse her family used to own. Upon returning back to her apartment at the bathhouse, she receives a package from her mother. In the story, Mayu wanted to know what she used to write in her notebooks, but her mother was unable to find the notebooks at the family home. So instead, she gives Mayu old photographs of their time living at the bathhouse. One of them features her father measuring her by carving lines in the wood at the top of the stairs. Upon seeing this, Mayu runs up the stairs and lays down by the place where her height had been recorded throughout time. The lines she has been seeing every day going up to her apartment. She breaks down crying and says, "I was here, wasn't I? We've all been here, haven't we? For a long time." The weight of time knocking on her fragile self. It's sad this place is closing down. She pauses, real sad. She cries, wishing to remember more of her past. Passage of time, maybe the personal relation. A wish for the legacy she lost with memory. She is no different than NieA now. She is vulnerable and scared, distraught, and with just a fleeting memory of her once shiny past. The last remaining physical proof of presence, of a life that happened, even if it now feels distant and dreamlike. Like a crying baby craving a mother, she reaches out to Kotomi for a bit of comfort and apologizes. Later on in the day, she gets in the bath like usual, and there she is. NieA is there, completely unapologetic. At first, Mayu gets frivolously mad, but the rage soon dissipates when she realizes it doesn't matter. Her friend is there. Slowly, she starts smiling. It really doesn't matter. They have dinner as usual and everything appears to be back to normal. The regular shenanigans. But soon enough, a heavy downpour that threatens to collapse the already fragile roof of the bathhouse starts. And in order to stop the roof from falling off, Mayu and NieA have to climb up and hold it into place. They hold it in place until Mayu notices something. NieA is standing up, looking blankly at the mothership. Its silhouette in the distance looms closer, both physically and emotionally. It feels more present than ever, and yet it entrances NieA. Her eyes are locked. One blink and millions of lights break. The mothership breaking with the sound of a million bells into thousands of small lights. Are they fireflies? The question is, why would they be fireflies? Well, it's simple and in that regard quite tragic. In Japan, old myths like those about light creatures or fireflies like the Onibi suggest the fact souls are like fireflies of light. The mothership transforms into fireflies, or perhaps it always was. Its matte black exterior melts into the night sky, its exit marked not by grandeur, but by a return to something familiar and fleeting. The mothership was created with the souls of dead aliens, on hundreds of thousands of souls, of past and legacy long gone. Its disappearance coincided with the reappearance of fireflies in the small town. NieA was hearing the voice from the mothership telling her sayonara because the souls of the aliens had to leave Earth, had to be left free. Mayu saw NieA in this state and a memory flashed in her mind, a memory of her and her father watching the fireflies by the riverbank, the last memory in a long string of lost legacies. Death had also come for NieA's ancestors, for their legacy, just as it had come for her father. Those who died, well, now the sky is full of them. NieA utters the words, "Goodbye, see you later," and just like that her mind disappears into the fireflies, into memory, into whatever space exists between dream and waking life. And as the sun rises and the rain fades, Mayuko notes, like it was only a dream, the mothership simply vanished one night. Something seemed different after that, yet still the same. It's a perfect encapsulation of NieA Under 7's ethos. Changes are subtle, oftentimes unnoticed by most people, and those who do, things pass, people leave, and yet somehow life continues strangely altered, but quietly resilient to these changes. The first leaf of autumn falls as Mayu remarks that's how summer has ended, and with it the strange transformative chapter of Mayuko's life. No dramatic farewell, no grand resolution, just a shift in the season marked by the smallest movement of nature. Just a leaf falling over, turning a page in a melancholic book. Episode 13 resumes with the usual style of comedy, except for a few scenes. Early on in the episode, when Mayu is running to catch the bus, she runs through the forest and, for just one moment, the same track as in the dream sequence plays. As time appears to have slowed down, autumn had finally settled by the end of the last episode, but now it appears to be in full force, and just for a moment, it feels like that moment when she was younger. She smiles at the falling leaves and keeps running. In a way, this appears to be mirrored symmetry. The beginning of the story is reflected in how it's all slowly coming to an end, slowly marching. Mayu remarks that despite the disappearance of the mothership, nobody cared, almost like nothing in the world had changed. The day slowly continues, the roof is now fixed, the workers finish their work on it. Mayu ends up on the roof with Chiaki, and she tells her that although the Enohana is at risk of being sold off, everybody living there has decided to enjoy the time they have with it rather than worry about its loss. Despite what happened, people remain hopeful. The Enohana hasn't been sold, people just hope it won't and keep moving forward. Something is different, not the same any longer. Mayu contemplates her worries one last time.
私はどうしてあんなに不安だったんだろう。本当は受験やバイトで疲れたせいじゃないって分かってる。胸にぽっかりと穴が開いたような気持ち。大切な時間はどんどん過ぎていってしまう。大切な場所もいつかはなくなってしまう。そう思うのが悲しかったから。それともそこにニアがいてくれなかったから。ニアはずっと母船に呼ばれてる気がするって言ってた。母船が消えていく前、ニアに何を言いたかったんだろう。それはニアに届いたんだろうか。さよなら。
She accepts the fact that she's going to be stuck with NieA for some time and smiles. As that happens, NieA manages to make another UFO, which is played for laughs, as it ends up making another hole in the roof, like nothing they did really mattered. In the end, the show doesn't try to explore points enough to uncover a mystery or lead the viewer to a grand conclusion. What it does is create a vessel for the emotion of acceptance. Perhaps I might call it a contemplation on the strange passage of time and on poverty and acceptance, coming to terms with things. What matters is the moment, a smile in the falling leaves, a shared meal, a repaired roof broken again by absurdity. Change comes slowly, almost imperceptibly, and sometimes the things we try hardest to fix fall apart anyway. But even so, people keep living, they make peace with what's uncertain, they laugh again. What comes around goes around, and when there are ups, there must be downs. As Mayuko smiles at NieA's latest mess, we realize that this too is a kind of resolution, of finding meaning in staying, in continuing, in learning to hold the weight of memory, loss, and companionship all at once. Like the first leaf of autumn drifting quietly to the ground, NieA Under 7 ends with grace. In a way, I see their venture through the Enohana like an almost Calpyso's island, an in-between space suspended outside the flow of ordinary life. Just as Odysseus was held on Calpyso's shore, caught between the temptation to stay and the responsibility to return home, so too do the residents of the Enohana drift between choosing to abandon it or holding on to hope until it slips away from them. The moment Mayuko begins to remember her home, truly remember it, not just as a place but as something tied to love, loss, and memory, and most importantly to her father, the illusion breaks. Her worries return. The comfort becomes too fragile to last. Like Odysseus, she cannot remain in status forever. The world beyond the Enohana still exists with all its hardship and uncertainty, and all the aliens and strangers. And yet, in the face of the bathhouse's likely end, she and the others find a kind of peace, not by leaving the island like Odysseus, but by recognizing its role in their journey and choosing to live on. If I were to say what NieA taught me, it was that there's value in both sadness and happiness. The two states cannot exist without each other. In its melancholy it fades in sadness, and yet it comes back happier than ever. I guess that's what makes us human, what makes me human. I've suffered depressions in my life and they've been sad. Each one felt like it was the worst thing to happen to me. I've lost people and I've thought people had abandoned me. Much like Mayu. These things are all the core of what makes us humans. Despite my terrible sadness, maybe I should be happy for it, because it means that there was something so good before that there's a reason to feel sad, and that there'll be something even better maybe after.